My name's Amanda Spivak, and I'm an associate professor at the University of Georgia. And I want to thank the organizers for putting the symposium together and for the invitation. I'm really excited to share information about our project supported by Georgia Sea Grant and a coastal incentive grant from the Department of Natural Resources. My collaborators include Giulio Mariotti at Louisiana State University and Megan Eagle at the U.S. Geological Survey, as well as two first-year master's students, Tiandra Mans and Gabriella Giordano. The two grants are supporting research that are asking different questions, but they share the same goal of understanding how salt marsh sustainability functioning are affected by a changing Georgia seascape. Georgia's marshes and salt marshes in general support a wide range of economically valuable ecosystem services, from tourism to food production to habitat for local and migratory species to burying carbon in the ground for long time periods and many things in between. Some of the most valuable ecosystem services provided by marshes include protection of coastal communities from rising sea levels and increasingly frequent and more intense storms. One of the reasons marshes are able to provide these services is that they can grow vertically in the tidal frame through the process of soil accretion. So salt marsh vertical accretion occurs through two main processes. The first is deposition of particles delivered by rivers and tides. And the second is annual root growth, which increases soil volume and the efficient burial of dead marsh grass biomass. We are focusing on two disturbances, tidal channel migration and sea level rise, that affect salt marsh spatial extent and the processes contributing to vertical accretion. With support from Georgia Sea Grant, we're looking at how tidal channel migration affects the balance between marsh loss and expansion. We're focusing on large tidal channels dissecting marshes that are constantly moving laterally, with one edge retreating and another prograding. We can see patterns of progradation and erosion using data layers of historic marsh area from GRAP. And here is a section of a marsh in the Doughboy Sound near Sapelo Island. The blue line denotes the marsh edge in the 1800s, the green in the 1930s, and the red in the 2000s. So you can see the small peninsula in the center has been steadily prograding southward, while the opposite edge has been retreating. The pace of tidal channel migration can be on the orders of meters per year, and this has implications for marsh spatial extent, as well as how old and newly formed marshes are functioning. In addition, tidal channel migration could threaten the stability of built infrastructure, such as the power lines circled here, as well as docks. They can also reduce the success of new green infrastructure, such as living shorelines. One of the questions we are addressing in this project is whether marsh loss by tidal channel migration is compensated by marsh progradation. So this is one of Giulio's preliminary maps of marsh area change between 1850 and 2017. The areas in yellow represent regions of marsh gain, red represents loss, the green represents no change in marsh area, and the blue represents open water areas that haven't changed. So what you can see is that most of the marsh area is not changed, but there are peninsulas and edges where we have significant loss or gain. Here in the center is a blown up section of the map on the left. This is the same marsh section along Doughboy Sound that we looked at earlier with the GRAP layers. But by zooming in, you can see more clearly changes in gain and loss over time. We chose three areas in this section as representative sites to study whether areas of progradation and retreat have similar ecological and geochemical characteristics. And we're going to come back to this shortly. But first I want to share with you this preliminary result from Giulio's analysis. Here he finds that with respect to 1850, there's been a roughly 7% increase in marsh area through the process of progradation, but that's balanced by a roughly 11% loss in marsh area through the process of erosion. So through this kind of analysis, Giulio's addressing another one of our research objectives, which is to identify hot spots of channel migration. The second disturbance we are studying with support from a coastal incentive grant is sea level rise. Changing precipitation patterns and rising sea levels are affecting salinity patterns in river estuary systems, which in turn affects the distribution of salt, brackish, and freshwater wetlands. So here are two salinity transects from the Satilla River, In the top, during a high discharge period, you can see that the salinity is quite low. But in the bottom figure, during a low discharge period, you can see that salinity increases substantially. Now, while river salinity oscillates naturally due to rains, droughts, and tides, we see some evidence of global change in sea level rise signals along the Sotilla. So specifically, we're looking at changing patterns in marsh vegetation, and here are two vegetation distribution maps. The bottom is from a 2004 paper by Higginbotham and others, and the top is from an Alexander and Laddick 2015 EIG report. In both maps, I've circled the same areas in the previous slide that showed the large swings in salinity. In the 2004 paper on the bottom, it shows that this area is dominated by juncus, which is in pink, with some brackish marsh in green and some salt marsh in gray. And then we compare that to the top plot. The 2015 report shows that the area of juncus in yellow has really contracted, while the area of salt marsh in blue has really expanded. And we have confirmation of this change from recent surveys. So here's a photo of Spartina alterniflora, a salt marsh grass, in an area that was previously dominated by juncus. To address our research question as to how well coastal wetlands will keep pace with sea level rise, we are sampling across salinity and elevation gradients in the Sotilla. We're comparing areas that have historically been salt marshes to mesohaline and freshwater reaches, where we see evidence of plant community shifts. Here I've highlighted the location of our estuarine sites, which have historically been dominated by Spartina alterniflora, and our mesohaline sites, where we see evidence of a transition from juncus to alterniflora. Here are the LiDAR data from both sites, showing that they have similar elevations at the creek bank edges and lower elevations towards the marsh interior. This summer, we are planning to sample freshwater areas where we see transitions of terrestrial plant dieback and the establishment of wetland species. Here's an example of one site we are considering, where you can see the loss of trees between 2011 in the top photo and 2017 in the bottom image. Overall, we anticipate that this design will allow us to evaluate how salinity and different inundation patterns affect coastal wetland functioning, including vertical accretion rates and soil carbon storage across our marshes. For both our tidal channel migration and global change and sea level rise projects, we're focused on understanding responses in marsh soil carbon storage and accretion. So for both projects, we're doing very similar analyses. We're calculating vertical accretion rates based on lead-210 and cesium-137 radioisotopes. We're also assessing soil carbon content, composition, and sources by using a variety of different physical and geochemical techniques. We're estimating rates of soil carbon turnover using 14C approach. And then we're contextualizing our results by assessing changes in plant community composition, so looking at species, biomass, and abundances. We're looking at pore water chemistry, as well as patterns of tidal inundation and salinity. And we're also looking at elevation sites. And I want to reintroduce two graduate students, Tiandra Mans, and she's working on the Sea Grant project focused on tidal channel migration, and Gabriella Giordano, who is working on the Coastal Incentive Grant focused on the sea level rise signal. And as I mentioned earlier, deposition of riverine particles plays an important role in marsh accretion. And to assess the supply of particles to our study sites, Julio is using MODIS data to quantify seasonal total suspended sediment concentrations in rivers along the Georgia coast. This figure here shows the preliminary data, which is an average and seasonal total suspended sediment concentration over the last 20 years. Julio will be using these data to assess potential relationships between total suspended sediment supply and marsh area change. We're also using these data to interpret our soil core results and to assess contributions of riverine particles to accretion and carbon storage. Our research is use-inspired. Our data products will go to identifying areas that are erosional hotspots, and this will aid in identifying vulnerable infrastructure, as well as for actions such as placement of living shorelines. Our vertical accretion rate data from both the Doughboy Sound and the Sediment River can go to support SLAM modeling and assist in coastal planning. We're working with experts at the Carl Vinson Institute to integrate our results into coastal hazards policies. Our plant protection data from both the Sediment and the Doughboy Sound will go to support bioenergetics modeling that's being done by our partners at Ducks Unlimited. Our soil carbon data will be used to estimate blue carbon storage in Georgia's marshes and potential use for that in policy. And finally, we're describing processes that are affecting the sustainability and functioning of Georgia's salt marshes. And so with that, I'd really like to thank both Georgia's Sea Grant and the Coastal Incentive Grant for their support, and I'd be happy to take any questions. Thank you.